This is one of the best accessories you can get for the Canon M50, and it legitimately improves the usability and the image quality out of this camera. So without further ado, let's just get right into it. So this is the Viltrox EF to EF-M speedbooster adapter. And so essentially this is just this adapter right here that adapts Canon EF lenses to a Canon EF-M body, which is any of the Canon EOS M series like the Canon M50, M50 Mark II, M6, M5, M2, all the other different Canon EOS M series cameras. However, this isn't just any standard adapter. Like I said, this is a speed booster adapter. So it has this piece of glass inside the adapter that fits between the lens and the camera. And essentially what this does is allows an APS-C sensor camera like the Canon EOS M series cameras to have a much wider field of view like a full frame camera would. Now, if you don't already know about this, hearing that rough explanation might sound like it doesn't really do too much besides just make your lens wider. However, there's three main things that this does to help improve your image. So I'm gonna go ahead and go over those three things, as well as of course talk about some of the downsides of this adapter as well. And hopefully after this video you'll learn a little bit about this adapter, and it'll hopefully help you decide if this is something that will improve your experience with your Canon M50. Alright, so the first main point of this adapter is, like I said, to widen the field of view on your image. So I really don't know a non-confusing way to explain this. If you have some knowledge with cameras, you should be able to understand this. If not, I'm going to try to explain this in the simplest way possible. So the Canon M50 has an APS-C sized sensor, and this is the sensor right here. It's pretty much right behind the lens mount. And this is smaller than a full frame sensor, which is kind of the standard sensor size. It's going to give you a 1x crop. So if you have a 50mm lens on a full frame sensor, it'll be a 50mm lens. However, on an APS-C camera like the Canon M50, because it has a smaller sensor than full frame, it essentially crops in on whatever focal length your lens is. So for example, if I put a 50mm lens on a Canon M50, which is what I have right here, the sensor in this camera will essentially crop in 1.6 times on that 50mm lens. It'll essentially give you a full frame equivalent of an 80mm lens. So a 50mm lens on a full frame camera and a 50mm lens on a Canon M50, the Canon M50 will be a lot more zoomed in. It'll be equivalent to an 80mm lens, which is much more zoomed in telephoto. However, the speed booster widens that field of view by 0.71x. So essentially on the Canon M50, whatever lens you put on there, multiply it by 1.6, and that'll give you the true focal length of the lens with the crop. So 50mm times 1.6 is 80mm, but then you put this adapter on as well, then you do that 80mm times 0.71, which is about 56.8mm. Alright, I'm really sorry about all that random numbers and stuff. Again, I'm sure some of you understand that and some of you didn't, but at the end of the day, with this adapter, a 50mm lens will give you about a 56.8mm field of view, which is just a little bit zoomed in from 50mm. But essentially how this will help you out is it'll give you a much wider field of view with any lens that you have, and it'll be much more equal to what the lens was built for. So that's pretty much the main thing that this adapter does. However, the fact that it widens your field of view in a way that adds two more features that improve the image quality with the M50. So widening your field of view will in turn let in even more light to your sensor, which will improve the low light performance of the Canon M50. So this adapter will essentially allow you to let in one stop more light, which one stop is actually double the amount of light. So in theory, this will allow you to lower your ISO by a full stop and still have the same brightness to your images, which will mean if you're in a really dark situation, you have to raise your ISO a bunch and your images get really noisy and grainy. The speed booster will counteract that a little bit. It'll allow you to lower your ISO and get higher quality, less noisy images in low light situations. Now that's super nice because the Canon M50 isn't the best when it comes to low light performance. I actually have a video where I pretty much just go through every single ISO setting on this camera so you can kind of see the noise performance at each ISO setting, which I'll link down in the description if you do want to check that out. But the fact that this can increase your low light performance fairly substantially is a huge help with the Canon M50, especially if you're doing a lot of low light photos and videos. Now another thing this adapter kind of does is, since it gives you more of a full frame equivalent field of view, it kind of gives you a fake way to have a full frame larger sensor which gives you a shallower depth of field as well. So if you take a lot of portraits or product photos and stuff like that where you really want to separate the background from your subject as much as possible and get that really creamy, blurry background on your images, this speed booster will greatly help with that because it will narrow your depth of field and essentially make everything in the background and foreground a lot blurrier than without this. And so those are the three main things that the speed booster does to improve your image quality. Now, two more quick things to mention. Number one, this is not weather sealed. So even if you have a weather sealed lens and a weather sealed EF-M mount camera, putting this adapter on here will essentially just get rid of the weather sealing. I wouldn't trust it, in any sort of rainy environments or anything, because it doesn't have a gasket or any weather sealing in general. So again, even if your lens and camera are weather sealed, if you put this adapter on, it won't be weather sealed anymore, and I just wouldn't trust using this adapter in extreme environments like rain and snow and stuff like that. And then lastly, I've said this a few times, but I want to make sure you know this, especially if you're not too familiar with lenses and lens mounts. You cannot use a standard Canon EF-M lens with this speed booster. So if you have a Canon M50 and you don't have an adapter, you just have lenses that click right into this camera with no extra adapter like this, you can't buy the adapter or speed booster, put it on the camera, and then put the same lens that you were already using with your M50 on the speed booster, because it's a completely different lens mount. So just make sure that the lenses you're going to use with this speed booster are Canon EF lenses, not Canon EF-M lenses. But besides that, in my opinion, this is a must-have adapter if you have a Canon M50. It seriously just adds so much functionality to the camera. It's just a no-brainer in my opinion if you have, that $150-ish budget. So that's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. Please go down and hit the like button and subscribe if you enjoyed this video and if it helped you out, and I'll see you in the next video.